Tansei, Tanishi, Buju. Welcome to Season 3 of the Traveling Métis podcast, the podcast that dives into Métis culture. Do you hear that? That is the sound of the river, which can only mean one thing. It is time to grab your paddle and your headphones and hop into your canoe, because we are heading down the river to talk to our fellow Michif storytellers. Welcome back to all my Michif lovers out there, whether you're a Michif loving another Michif, a kissing cousin, if you will, which is absolutely a topic for another episode, because I do remember my mother sitting me down when relaying our family lineage. She said, "Samantha, your great-great-great-grandfather and grandmother, they're cousins." To which is the reasoning I give as to why an educated woman such as myself cannot spell worth shit. It is just my mutant inbred DNA. What can I say, folks? Okay, I'm sorry. That is probably not the picture that we want to paint of our community. But I do think Jean Taye skipped that chapter in The Northwest is Our Mother, which is exactly where we're going right now. As northwest as we can possibly get from this discussion to our next guest's Métis roots in Fort St. John. Today, we are speaking with fiddler, filmmaker, and coder Andrew Konoff. But before we get to that interview, there's a little backstory on getting Andrew to the microphone today. It all starts with the IM4 Lab, where I met another Michif producer, Cole Vandale. Cole and I found one another, as two pasty-skinned Michif do in a predominantly First Nations group. We got to talking about Métis politics, our kissing cousins, and an up-and-coming Métis filmmaker named Andrew Konoff. Cole had just finished producing his film Plansh A Roo and was being a super good hype man, telling me that I needed to have Andrew on this podcast. But I was hard at work on season 2 and already had guests lined up, so I kind of cast this filmmaker aside, thinking, maybe one day I'll reach out. Well, 3 layovers and a 19-hour flight later, I found Andrew wandering the beats of Aotearoa, or New Zealand for all you colonizers out there. We were attending the best Indigenous film festival on the globe, Maoriland, and I definitely saw what Cole was talking about. Plansh A Roo is a beautiful semi-autobiographical film about a young Michif busking with a fiddle to raise money for a skateboard. But before we discuss Andrew's film, I need to dig deep into Andrew's soul to find his roots.
My name's Andrew Konoff. I'm a filmmaker and actor and coder of all things. And I'm Métis on my mom's side and Ukrainian on my dad's. Our Métis names are Shaw, Beaton, Bisson, and there's always another B one I forget. Barrie. Our family's from Fort St. John. I grew up in Regina and I live in Toronto now.
I was wondering, whenever I meet filmmakers and things like that, if there was anything that inspired you to become a storyteller.
I think the thing that got me to pick up a camera originally was I was a skateboarder and I just saw all these awesome skateboarding videos and I wanted to capture the fun that we were having as kids in downtown Regina on our boards. And I always had bigger dreams than I had any sense of how to enact in film. After getting into high school and just sort of not feeling like I had found my place very well, I just sort of put those things aside for a very long time until the middle of the first summer of the pandemic when I got accepted to Imaginative's Shorts Lab. And that's I like like the application I just threw in there, like put together in an evening. I was shocked at how I was able to pull it together, like to describe what story I wanted to tell. And something was always in there, in hindsight, in terms of my desire to tell stories through film, especially, but like it was dormant for decades, I guess. And I'm really glad I saw that because ever since then, it's been, it's really clear that this is fun for me. But I guess I'm learning how I want to tell stories and beginning to accept the thing in me that really does want to tell them.
Do you connect your Métis heritage and your culture into your storytelling? Like, is that important to put in for you?
Yeah. And it's kind of like hard to put my finger on exactly how that works. There was somebody, I think probably Jason Ryle, he's been involved in Indigenous film for a long time, but he was part of Imaginative when we were doing that lab, and he had this thing about like if it's a story you're telling, it's an Indigenous story, and it's kind of hard to unwind all the themes, but like the more I've thought about this short I did, which was about a coming of age story about this Métis kid growing up in downtown Prairie City in the summer, finding out that maybe he can busk with the fiddle tunes that his mushum taught him, like that's kind of like it's all in there already. Like the idea of making money just on the fringes of what's allowed, taking your fiddle and playing and hoping that pays your way. Like there's like a direct line there to, oh, we can live on the allotment and people won't kick us out. Like there's a whole other thing around skateboarding just being this kind of, you're taking this public space and kind of reconfiguring it as you imagine the fun tricks you want to do in it that I can't stop seeing as being very Métis. And it's all very funny. I don't know. Like as kids, you just pick up on it. You just do this stuff, right? And as an adult, like you start writing, you're like, where did that come from? And why is it in this shape? And it's the shape you grew up with. It's the shape you're raised in. And it's a shape that like, I mean, I think the funny thing about having this Ukrainian and Russian side of my family is like, it's also a shape that they recognize too in a lot of ways, something we share. And it's hard to like put your finger on exactly like what's going on there, but something is. And it's a lot of fun to be in touch with it and make it, and then to see other people connect with it. I mean, I know how you felt about like Maori Land, and then we were also at Chimawin. Is that am I remembering that right? In Saskatoon, another awesome film fest. But seeing people respond to this stuff that we've made in real time, other Native folks who just get it on some level, that it's very validating to see that happen. It closes the loop on something I'm just a little unsure about. Like, where is this coming from and why do I want to do it?
Yeah, in Saskatoon, like it was the youth block too. So to have like all those kids come up after and identify with it as well. Like you were saying, like you create something and you don't really know why you're doing it or who it's for, but it's put out there. Yeah, how did that sort of affect you?
That was special. I mean, it was really cool to get to share this stuff in Maori land in New Zealand and Aotearoa. But to come home to Saskatchewan for me, and then there was this like somebody like whooped, like hollered when the opening scene of my short came up. And I was just like, well, I don't know, maybe they recognize it, but it wasn't even from Saskatoon, this shot. It was in Winnipeg. It was like a little more abstract than that. Just like, this is our place in the world that we understand. And I, that hit me. I was like, I was just kind of like trying to breathe just the entire time and be in that moment with these teens. And I think there's some were really young, like 8 to 18 kind of, but they were really a perfect audience, especially for, I'd say, for our films, right? These little like funny coming of age kind of feeling things. And I was really, really, really happy to do that.
Plansh A Roo is based on your own experience, and we talked about experiencing watching it with those teens that are from Saskatchewan. Yeah, maybe if you want to talk about like your journey in telling that story and yeah, how that came about with Native.
So I got accepted to this first, I think it was the first Shorts Lab that they put on, and they'd been granted some money from Netflix to sort of get this thing going. And it was me and a bunch of actual filmmakers that keep saying, people who made stuff and who knew how to do this. And then I was just like, hi, like, what's up? And they've all been, like so awesome. Like Trevor Solway was one of the guys in the group, and he's kept making really cool things. And just getting to see how, honestly, one nice part of it is like, it doesn't get easier either. Struggle with the problems of writing. And it was actually very validating. Like, this isn't just simple, and it's not invulnerable work that everybody else is better prepared for. Frankly, if you're writing and directing and anything to do creative work, you have to be open to the very vulnerable human part of it every single time you do it. And we had such wonderful mentors come through, like Dennis Goulet. Like, there's so many big, awesome names that weren't even. It's funny, like, this is 2020. They weren't even big, big, big right at that moment, but well, actually, some of them were, and like still took time to talk to us about all of these elements. And yeah, so they were like very concrete, like, okay, great. This is wonderful advice to keeping dialogue working. This is a very important piece about how story works and how to work with story editors. There are all these like, tactical almost lessons we learned, but the biggest thing I got out of that was a script that I wrote and a process I could follow. And the sense that, honestly, it wasn't even the sense. It was Jason asked, who wants to make their short? And everybody put their hand up. And I was kind of like, maybe, I don't know. And without him asking that, I don't know if I would have ever imagined that I could. Like, it was a matter of fact kind of a question. And everybody else believed they could. And I just began to ask why I would want to, and why I didn't think I had conceived of it. And it, why not? Why not?
Why not and just go in for it? Because yeah, you are a filmmaker and a storyteller.
I needed to hear that. Yeah. Thanks. I, after the actual like formal Shorts Lab kind of thing wrapped up, we, there was just a lot of questions about how to move forward. It was the middle of the pandemic still. A lot of productions weren't happening and then had been bumped and then kind of took all of the resources with them. So by the time I got to go to, by the time I got funded, and that's a whole journey of itself through Canada Council and also with the Indigenous Screen Office for some finishing funds, it was 2022. And then began the problem of like, okay, like, how am I going to shoot this in the prairies? There's all these like tricky problems. I've been living in Toronto for a long time, and I just had this sense that I needed to tell it in the homeland. And, Regina's film industry is coming back, but it got shut down in a big way. And you have to make all these very pragmatic decisions, including, oh my God, how do we crew up? Like, how do we find people to make this with? Even if you have money, like, everything was very scarce then because everything had kind of died off during the pandemic. And so all the people who are still working got snapped up. And so eventually I found wonderful producers in Cole Vandale and Ryan Cooper. And Ryan had this connection with Farpoint Films, and they made it with us. And they snuck it in between two productions that they had going already. Basically, we had like 5 days over a weekend even. And we were just like, okay, we have to get it done. Great incentive to make some stuff happen for sure.
You don't know this, but just quickly because you mentioned Cole's name, I was in the IM4 lab with Cole, and Cole had actually before we had went to Maori land too, and Cole was like, "Oh, you should. There's this Métis filmmaker," and mentioned your name. Cole was like, "If you have a podcast, you should interview Andrew." So you have people who think very highly of you as a filmmaker for someone who maybe a few years ago you did not see yourself as this filmmaker, this person coming out of nowhere.
That is really, really kind. Oh my gosh, that's really nice to hear. Like, yeah, I mean, because it's easy. It's like just describing this so far. There's 2 years, largely, it seems like you're doing nothing. Finally going to the camera at the end of 2022. And then it's another whole year before the edit's done. And then it's another whole long while before you find out if you got into any festivals at all and anybody even wants to see this thing. And it can feel very lonely. And you're starting to be like, yeah, am I doing something wrong? Like, what is, and I don't know. I think to know that we're all in this together, to know that we also can have each other's backs like that and promote everybody's work. And honestly, sometimes it's just like, just being around. It's a huge thing. That's really sweet though.
And your story was very like personal too. It's like a semi autobiographical tale too. So like was it hard for you to go back into your childhood and maybe tell this side of yourself?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I was like it's like it begins somewhere that and maybe that's why it came out so easily as a treatment and an application. And but there's a certain point you have to accept kind of that this is its own thing as a story that might speak to something less particular to your own experience, but maybe a little more universal to everybody's sense of what it's like to grow up or what it's like to grow up with prairies or there was somebody said this thing that has always stuck with me that I kind of have to mourn the thing you wrote in order to shoot it. It's not how you pictured it on the page. And then you have to mourn the thing you shot in order to be able to edit it and turn it into something. And I wrote, directed, and edited. So I was doing a lot of mourning, I guess is the best way to put it. And yeah, now you end up at the other side of it. I like for me it was like, yeah, again, like I bought my first skateboard by busking with the fiddle tunes I learned from John Arcand. And like my teacher in Regina too was a Métis guy who it's just funny, like how did that even come up? Like nobody in my family played fiddle anymore. I just happened to run into like this friend who did play fiddle and I was mad jealous of him and I wanted to play it and like and we found a teacher and it's just one of those things like if you grow up around the culture like you'll find your way into a part of it that you really associate with fun nice things and there's like from what I understand my grandpa played fiddle. He died shortly before I was born and my mom lost his fiddle. It's very sad. But sometimes it skips a generation.
My mom tells me about like the kitchen parties and everybody was playing the fiddle or like the music instruments and just like that. And then yeah, like for some reason it just loses that generation. And then I don't know if it's like a desire or an interest for the next generation to like, I don't know, like find something that they never had.
It's funny because I think in our own ways we always want to escape the sort of familiar to find our own way in the world and it could be a real tricky, a bit of a journey. But I think my mom, leaving Fort St. John and moving to the city and like there's something in there that she was trying to get away from like and there's something in growing up in these downtown Regina Prairie City kind of things that I was like eager to just get the hell away from. And now I can look back and sort of really, well, I was visiting, in Saskatoon and Regina this summer. I was just beginning to see what it was about this place that shaped me so fundamentally and appreciating it as part of who I am. It's I don't know. It's maybe it's not even just about like fiddle and all the specific things and skills or whatever I got out of it, but just like, oh my gosh, like this is what home is for me and for some very deep reason that I couldn't tell you exactly how it works, but and I had my first time visiting Fort St. John the previous summer for the first of any of our cousins' weddings, and the first time I'd been back in maybe like 10 years. And it was just like, oh, yeah, 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 I get it. Like it just hits you deep, and like I really missed it. And it was really, yeah, just a homecoming after homecoming. It's funny. It's like it's got to have something to do with being connected to these stories and beginning to tell them and share them. Maybe it does make it easier for me to recognize, you know, where these things are in my life and the real value of them to me and like foundation even.
The themes that like when I talk to a lot of Métis people is that like theme of like finding home, because like a lot of Métis people as like half breeds, it's like our ancestors where it's like you're not allowed in this space, you're not allowed in that space. So it's like it seems like that might be what every Métis person, whether it be back in like the 1800s or modern day Métis people, like we're always trying to find this sense of like, well, where do we belong? So that kind of feels like a universal theme between Métis people.
I do think that is like directly analogous to what I'm trying to figure out in my own creative work these days, which is like it's one thing to be like, oh, here's where the money is and the opportunities are. And it's another to be like, what is my own voice and my own path in my own journey if I'm not just fitting into what I guess like I can find some chance to get money for or somebody else's sense of what an appropriate tale for Métis folks or Native folks is. And I mean, because like a lot of it is if it's in you, you know, it's just going to keep coming out. Your own commitment to your own authentic life and story and path, like God, something great's going to come out of there, but it's probably going to look a little different than we're used to. It's just, but to the people who matter and who it matters to, like, I think they're going to recognize it. I think that's, if I'm beginning to have a sense of what I can recognize as an authentic expression is coming from who I am and where I'm from, then, you know, maybe there's more films I can make that make some kids holler when they see the first frame of. That would be sick.
But again, as a Métis person, everything you do is going to be Métis influenced. If you wanted to talk a bit about maybe starting out with those skate films that you started your career, because even though you thought you weren't a filmmaker, I would say like even just experimenting with those films, like you clearly had a desire to film, and you know, was skate culture like, is it still a big part of your life, or is that something that maybe is in the past?
Yeah, I mean, it's like my knees, the best days of my knees are in the past, that's for sure. Like a 34-year-old skateboarder, a little tricky.
Like that Steve Buscemi meme where it's like, hey kids, you just walk around with your skateboard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I feel like that when I'm at a skate park these days. But also it's like a timeless place. Every like I'll just be sitting there with a lot of like 15-year-olds at 3 p.m. on a Thursday or whatever, and just being like, oh, this is like I remember these conversations from when I was a young one too. It's very funny. I like, yeah, no, the stuff we would shoot was we had this like we'd call it like a posse, which we kind of grew up in a neighborhood full of gangs, like I don't know, Indian posse and all that stuff, and like it was a big part of what you were scared of as a kid in Regina. Is just like, are we going to get on the wrong side of like the wrong neighborhood? And you know, that's part of the skateboarding thing is you're navigating the world in a very real way, and you have to be aware of what security guards are going to come and kick you out. Or, you know, there are always a couple just violent freaks who like if you were skating on their property, there was this one spot that we always went to, and this one guy would come out and he started shoving me. It's like I was 12 then. He just started shoving me and throwing my board until we were off of his property, and I was just I remember this stuff would happen constantly, basically, and you learn how to get around it and avoid it and notice what's up, and you learn where it feels safe in the world. And I think those videos, like, they all kind of come from that sense of like, oh my God, it's like autonomy. Like we can have fun and we can learn how to navigate what is out there. Like it's actually maybe not a threat. It's actually a chance to go find out what's in the world in a way that's cool, like to whatever your idea of cool is. And yeah, it was really like, yeah, pick up a video camera and how much of that can we capture? How, like, what amazing thing can you do with the skateboard? What just fun can you have with a bunch of kids your age that shows up? And like somehow it really just shows up, like if it's there and you're committed to just being around the people you're at, you just press record and oh my God, it shows up. Watching these videos now, I'm just like, oh, like you can't fake that stuff. Like I think these are like primordial lessons for me as a director, like there's a lot of things you gotta do. You gotta write a good script, you gotta do all this, but when it works, it's because it works between us relationally. And I think, yeah, again, not to hit this point too hard, but like we as Métis folks always had to mediate kind of like the spaces we're in between two worlds, being really hyper aware of what's happening and what's working. That can it can be as much a trauma response as it can be an opportunity for the most beautiful, fulfilling, um, alive things in life. And I think, it's it's a skill that I think we pick up, and just glad to have found a place for that in my own life, I think.
Because you were also a musician as well. Do you sort of feel that coming through when you play music as well?
Sometimes it's funny because I mean it's the same sort of thing. Like if the magic can be missing from a scene, it's like the magic can be missing from a band or a song or any piece of this, and that doesn't mean it's yeah. Like I think I used to think that that was an opportunity for me to just do more and do better and be more perfectionistic in a way. And I think what I'm learning is that that's not actually a path to finding where the magic is. And with music, it's really pretty visceral. Like I wondered if you met Nigel Irwin down yeah, at Maori Land. We got along great there. He's a composer and works with Nagamo Publishing, and he's a just really talented, awesome musician who I've been collaborating with since I've got back to Toronto after that festival. And there was this night where we went out he was having his birthday party at the studio, and I brought my fiddle, being like, I don't know, maybe I can hop in on a jam or two. And there were some moments in that night where it was just like, oh my God, like, where did that come from? Like, how did that jam, how did that song come alive with all of these people who've never really played that much with each other before? And yet, there you go. And the best sense I have of it is like, well, we all have these skills. We all have this desire to make the most of them. Very natural. It's really nice when it works, and you can just grab on a little too tight to make it work sometimes. And I think that's true with anything. And like when it works, it's like almost like, somebody acknowledged that they were fallible and they gave it a shot anyway. They tried something, and even if it doesn't work, it's like suddenly we're all released from the tension of will it work or not, and we can all just give our own little vulnerable shot to things. With music, it's so visceral and immediate, and like I don't know, with film, it's still in there, and I think it can be hard on a set where there's all this stuff happening, a ton of people, and like just a lot of technical things going on, to remember that that's fundamentally your job. How do you make the magic, and how do you make it feel like other people are allowed to release theirs too?
When you were describing sort of you guys playing at the studio, it reminded me of like the stories of my mother, like saying like people just coming together and playing music just to play, like not trying to create anything, just like purely expressing themselves and having fun. And yeah, if you could do that in any art form you're doing, like again, like you talked about, like not necessarily like chasing success, but just like expressing yourself, right? Like, how do you keep that alive in anything you're creating?
I mean, if I'm going to take you at that as being a question, then I don't know. And I think that's like you have to be constantly humbled. Like that's part of it. Yeah, there's no cheat code here as much as I wish there were, because it is humbling. And it's very easy to go a very long time without finding people who can also share in that humility. That's a really freaky thing because, like the thing you can control is your own ability. Well, ability, I don't know. It's like almost like your own willingness to face this vulnerable, humbling thing. That's really hard. That's a life's work in and of itself, whether you make a creative thing out of it or you just, well, you're making your life out of it. That's all you can really control. And yeah, I think over time I've been able to notice like, oh, there's some other people in the world who've dared to like travel that path in their own life. And my gosh, is it really, really nice to run into them and make some really cool stuff happen.
The feature you're working on is about your great granduncle's experience running away from residential school. Yeah, like what about that story made you want to, tell that?
Part of it was just maybe the thing I was really connected to as a skateboarder as a kid, that whole sense of autonomy and like just wanting to get up and go get it. Like it's this thing. So Angus Shaw, my great granduncle, he was like the youngest of all of the kids in our family who got sent to residential school. And like for Métis and Treaty 8, it was a choice by and large. Like part of it was they were too far from a school they could just walk to, but there really weren't many of those at all at that time. This is like the beginning of the 1900s. And so I see this sort of like, I don't know, this very young, vulnerable kid. He was 8 at the time when he went to residential school and decided to run away. And it's like, what in you makes you wanna, like, what makes you know as an 8-year-old that this is not the place for you? And he knew so confidently that he got from like down the Peace River a week. It's how far it was from home. Is the Anglican residential school in the name of the town is escaping me right now. But yeah, so he's deep, far away from home down the river and finds a way back and, survives the great thing and lives a very fruitful, beautiful, independent life as a trader and tracker and just sort of Métis badass after that. And yeah, I think like that's the thing that just emotionally I've like, I get it. Like, I had a lot of moments in my own life where I was like, yeah, this is not for me. And getting to something that is for me is going to be really hard, but it matters. I'm not going to stick around. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to go. And I could just, yeah, like I could see it. I could absolutely understand. And then it's just a story about, I mean, there's so much awful crap in all of our histories about residential schools that I think I wanted to, have this chance to understand what my family's history was there. And also, and this is really tricky to talk about, it's just like, like there's a specific Métis experience, the specific historical context there, all these things that map together to mean that my family decided that we would go. We would send our children there, that actually the future that we've chosen is really wrapped up in how Canada turns out and what Canada allows us. And so we're going to assimilate in a way. It's like the beginning of, yeah, how much can we fit in officially in a sanctioned way in this new state? that we're under. And because, like, you don't have to go more than a generation back for my family then to see that we all got kicked out of the Red River, or even on our settler sides, that like these French and Scottish ancestors usually got kicked out of their land back in Europe. Like there's the whole it's basically a very parallel story everywhere where capital takes up all the land, kicks out tenant farmers, kicks out people who'd been there, and finds a way to make it more profitable without all of these interlopers. And it's just, okay, well, there's still people who have to go somewhere. And all this stuff intersects into a story about a kid who, well, wasn't really on board with this whole idea of where he's going to fit in, and being told so forcefully by so many people, and being trapped between that world and also this other side of other Native kids who were stuck in this with him, who weren't Métis, who were First Nations, who were forced to go there, who also really didn't like Angus, who was a very blonde-haired, blue-eyed Métis like I am. And he got bullied from them, and he got really harshly treated by the people who ran the residential school. And so it's a very tricky thing as to think about a kid in that position, but also to begin to talk about these many different things in a film is like, it's if so, I think it can feel like a minefield, but it is also so representative of our histories. And I feel like that a lot of people, we've told stories about residential schools, but it's been very easy to shy away from some of these trickier things that I think make them human stories and not just like shibboleths or like obelisks of like horror and tragedy. Um, there's a human story in each of these stories, and hopefully I can tell ours.
The conversations around like truth and reconciliation for like Métis people, it's like, yeah, there's like these two sides within you. So it's like nuanced because of colonialism and the different tactics and rules to like separate people, like a blonde haired, blue eyed kid going to a residential school, right? Like, and those other kids, seeing this person like, oh, you're here. Like, why are you here with us? Right. So like these conversations that I think, like, especially for your film, like maybe we haven't seen on film before.
I mean, that's really the core of it, is just like, I feel like it's time we start talking with nuance about our histories and even the scarier parts. Like, to be able to make art as an Indigenous person in Canada about being an Indigenous person in Canada puts you in direct contact with a lot of other Indigenous people in Canada who also have a lot of really, really just crappy history about this. And it makes it very fraught and tricky. And I swear to God, if we don't make art like this that opens us up to having these conversations, as tricky as that's going to feel, then I don't know how on earth we could possibly begin to heal from it. And yeah, it's funny because, like, yeah, to go in and be like, I'm gonna heal us all. I'm gonna be the healer in my conversations. Doesn't feel like what I want to do as a day job. I think if you get to tell a story, though, then it's like people have it in their own hands. They have their own autonomy to be able to dare to integrate what that story says with what they know about the world. And it's also like you can't force anybody to listen to your story and be really affected by it. All you can do is tell a story. And gosh, I guess that's the humility piece of it again. Is like, ultimately, it's kind of just a story, but it's telling it in the right way.
Like anytime I talk to like a Métis person, it's like, well, like, because I teach some podcasting to like youth, and it's like, learn your family's story, because like the only thing like the colonizers can't take from you is your story. Like, it's your truth, it's your family's history. I don't know, there's like a power in like knowing your story. And I'm sure as you were doing research and like hearing the stories about your great granduncle, like, did you find it like healing in a way for you?
I don't know. It's crazy how much the details of what people endured at residential school are kind of very familiar. Like reading through some of the Truth and Reconciliation, like summaries and papers and stuff that they canvassed from people's experiences. You're like, oh wow, that all echoes. Like that sounds like what everybody had to endure for 100 years, basically. And my God, but the stuff that like really affected me was just the fact of being able to sit down and talk with family about it. Like to get to meet relatives who I've never got to meet in person and talk about these, like what they remember about Angus and like what they remember about my grandpa and what they, all these people who, God, it was just like I was born like 5 years before, like I would have maybe got to have some, it's such a sad thing in a way to like, yeah, just be on the, like you can see how close I guess we are to losing all of these stories entirely and getting to, even if it's, I don't know, like the new relationships I got to build in my family because of these questions and this story is like that's worth its weight in gold, it feels like.
Because I find like a lot of people like it's like the pan Indigenous experience as well, where it's like they don't realize like, oh, like people are individuals. Like there's specific stories for certain people where it's like a lot of, how we're talking about adding that like nuance into these stories of like it's not just like one residential school experience. Like of course, like there's similar experiences when you read about them, but like people are individuals. It's like, how did this make this person feel? Like how did it shape the family that came after them and things like that?
This research I've been doing has been about like settlers themselves who are part of treaty commissions or traveling as part of them, who are enacting these colonial policies, and hearing about like their own sense of what they were like. Why? What are they doing? How are they conceiving of this Canada they were building, and where these half breeds fit into it? Is always like they always had this awe and admiration of like, oh, like these guys really know how to get around and like, and then they would, there's like some like native communities, they like hate everybody there. And they're just like, where's this coming from? Like, it's a very astonishing piece to me of like, there is actually a story for each of these people too, each of the settlers who was part of this colonial regime that turns into Canada. And it has been a huge part of like having a sense of this moment, I guess, and the one that we've inherited. And it makes me feel a lot less crazy to sort of be like, oh, they were like that then too.
Do you feel like when you're researching and learning about like your family's history and maybe just like the Métis experience, like we were talking about, like these half breeds finding their place in general, like do you feel a responsibility like when you're like reading this and like you're like, okay, I'm going to use this in my story, or like to be a voice for, we were talking about like you don't want to be like the healer and like that's not the job that you want, but like do you feel that like as you're creating?
That's a great question. There's something akin to responsibility, I think I feel. And it's, yeah, there's a weight to all this that yeah, again, I think when you feel it when you hang out with other Indigenous folks and you start talking about this stuff and to be flippant about it is just so not obviation, a denial or refusal of that responsibility to like you can tell when you're just, not treating it like it is. I have no better word for that. Yeah, there's a sense of, oh, like I know this, you know this, we know it because we came from it, and like, why would I ignore that feeling? It's probably the only thing that will allow me to tell a story here in any real way, and I don't know how exactly that shakes out, but it is. I think it's just again like it's as if you're a storyteller, it's as if you have to have a sense of what is, all these things that have happened. And you have to know who your audience is. You have to know this situation, this context that we all find ourselves in the moment in which you tell the story. That's the only way you can really tell a real story. And that is an enormous responsibility when it's honestly not just something like heavy like residential schools and the colonial history of Canada, but like at all to tell any story at all, you just get a sense of the weight of the truth. And I think that that can be just as heavy as like if you're telling comedy stories and like trying to get people to laugh, you shouldn't cut your own like joke short because you've ignored what the real, you know, like fact is that you're bringing up. And I don't know, it's yeah, it's a weird one. I feel like I'm just this is probably why that constantly humbling feeling is coming up a lot, and why this writing process is going, you know, it's going, but it's going slowly, and it's it's something I'm learning as I go with.
We were talking about responsibility, like you're, yeah, not treating it lightly, right? You're like understanding that, like, this is a real person, this is their story, like, this is a similar story probably to a bunch of people. Like we said when we were in Saskatoon, all those kids that related and enjoyed your, you know, little skateboard movie, right? Like they loved it and they could relate because you made a story that is universal. Like we were talking about, like these themes for Indigenous people are universal, right? So it's like, yeah, you're able to treat it with respect because you know it's your story and it's also many other people's story as well.
There's something funny, like I was just thinking about your short. It's called Metis Toy Story, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like sometimes the only way to do this is like allegorically with a little bit of a joke and like it's very funny and like I don't know, I guess I keep coming back to the humor thing. Like if it's funny, it's probably because there's a truth that's in it that you found.
That's, I guess, like my trauma response is like find find the humor in something, as it's a super uncomfortable conversation to have. So if we're laughing, like at least like people. I remember I was in like a room with all like First Nations people, and it was just like me, and like we were in our circle and we were like going around, and like I was like, I have to make a joke. Like because I already know I'm like the single like light skinned blue eyed person in this room. Like
I do think well, it's like we're canvassing all the like Métis trauma responses and being very funny and being well playing fiddle, getting the party going. Hell yeah. Like I mean, because there's joy in these things and we get it and we want to share community and also it's just like I don't know, like yeah, it's not all bad, scary stuff all the time, even if we have come from a lot of bad, scary stuff. It's my favorite, you know, ways to cope or making dumb jokes and making music.
yeah, before we end, I wanted to go back to because I know like for me, like you talked about like my short, like I was in the IM4 lab and Loretta Todd was like one of the matriarchs, of course, like Doreen Manuel, and there's other matriarchs that were also there. But has there anyone been, like you said, you were mentored on your short? Has there been like any sort of influence or people in your life that you would say like, because you said you came into that, you're like not really seeing yourself as a as a filmmaker. Was there anyone who kind of encouraged you or that you see that like, oh, they really influenced how I make and tell stories?
I think like Dana Goulet's shorts were really we saw them as part of the lab and it was just you know she went to the other high school, you know, the rival high school of mine in Regina, and just something about the shorts that she shot with the kids that she had in them and the like I don't know, the like there's something about the vibe of it that I was very much, oh, this is how you can tell a story with these moments. Like it's really, yeah, it doesn't, you don't need to be too heavy-handed at all. You just trust your gut as a filmmaker and you'll get it there. That was, yeah, she was really fantastic. But I feel like a lot of, yeah, influence wise, I think there's 10 billion at a time. It's like I'm getting better at describing them in music because they're just like I add them to a playlist and go. But like I grew up just we didn't have cable TV growing up, and so it was either the like three channels on the rabbit ears or watch movies. So we'd rent like a lot of movies and watch them as a family. And all these things, they all have like, I love these like 80s and 90s action movies where the stakes are total and there's one person, one very fallible human person who just has to dare to be like the best they can be in this moment to save their lives, and all these others like Aliens and Die Hard and Run Lola Run. Oh my God. All these things that have like this, maybe they're a kinetic center, even if they're not a big Hollywood movie, but like a indie film that like just has a sensibility of like, look at how complete and full and energetic life can be in a moment when you dare to be all you who you can be. And like there's a lot of little things like that that I really can't get enough of. But yeah, I don't know, I think deep down I have this like sensibility films or formed around these like Hollywood movies that are just so nostalgic for me. And yeah, I wonder how all that's going to change as I like keep making stuff. There's, I think the beautiful thing about this stuff is that, yeah, again, if it's in you, you keep making it, you find a way to, and you get to have eras in a very, very Taylor Swifty kind of a way, you know? So
You're going to get to your action movie era, your Die Hard era.
you know, before my knees give out even more, I better.
Just Tom Cruise doing your own stunts.
Yeah. Well, he's still gone. He's really gone.
Yeah. Is there anywhere people can find either you or your work, or if they'd like to learn more about you?
Yeah, I'm just on Instagram as Konoff, Konoff. And after that, yeah, like it's really the point where I get to put this beautiful little short to bed and begin to work on some other stuff and learn how to make something new. And it's a really exciting kind of spooky moment, but I'm really glad we got to kind of talk about the whole thing today.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Merci to Andrew for being on the podcast today. I cannot wait to see the next project that comes out of that brilliant Machif mind. We talked about some heavy stuff today, and as always, we encourage you to reach out to community members for support should you need it. That is the great thing about being Indigenous. We all have similar experiences and can share those healing moments with one another. Again, if you'd like to reach out to Andrew and find out more, we'll leave that Instagram handle in our show notes. And we hope you come back for our last episode of the season, because it is a beautiful story of how Teresa Lafreniere Fama found the courage to share the story of her family through quilting. This episode was written and hosted by Samantha Loney, with music composed by Etienne Beausoleil, edited by Cassidy Villebron-Baracus, and produced by the Metis and Me program. This podcast was made in support from our sponsors, 880 Cities and the City of Barrie's Arts and Culture Investment Program. Remember to like and subscribe for more content. Merci for listening.